All right, here we are at the Principles of Design section, chapter 1 of our textbook called Understanding Art. This chapter, chapter 1 and chapter 2, these first many chapters are going to be on our exam, and you will be tested on these points. So pay special attention to these and take notes if needed. Principles of Design, Chapter 1. Common concepts and descriptors. There are many processes that an artist will use to make art. Some of the art they will make will be three-dimensional, such as sculpture, while other methods are two-dimensional, like drawing or painting. No matter the methodology an artist might use, there are basic words that can describe how their artworks are designed. The following are basic terms that will get us started: form, iconography, mediums and techniques, style, subject, and content. Form. Form refers to the totality of a composition or design, the arrangement or organization of all its visual elements. This sculpture in the picture by the artist Sarah Z is made up of a lot of stuff. It looks like junk. I think some of it was rescued from the trash, almost certainly. But it is organized in a way where it creates a single artwork. When we talk about the form of this artwork, I see a ladder. I see objects in a circle. I see these blue dots with strings hanging on them. I see a big blue area over here. The way this is organized and the cluster of objects and even the specific objects are the form of this artwork. What is the form of this artwork? Well, we can look down here and see that the artist Elizabeth Peyton produced a watercolor on paper. So it is a watercolor, and the watercolor is organized with blue around the perimeter. We have brown in the bottom left corner. We have another color of brown in the top. And we are looking at a person. You can even go on to describe how the paint is on the paper. It's very washed out. The paint isn't very opaque, meaning you can see through it. It is transparent. So you can see the layers of the paint. This is the form. Another definition is iconography. Studying iconography, or the symbols and themes in works of art, allows more complete understanding of underlying meanings. Immediately, when you look at this artwork, do you recognize any iconography or any symbols? I can name a few. This here This is iconography. What is it? It is a hand making a peace sign. What is right here? This is an image of a dove. What does a dove represent? A lot of people will say it represents peace as well, especially in the Christian tradition. You might even be able to recognize this person. Who is this person? I won't fault you if you can't figure it out. But her name is Aung San Suu Kyi, who at the time was really known as being a very human rights oriented political figure in a country of Burma. I see other smaller iconography symbols, such as these factory buildings, a police officer with a stick or like a club, the eyeball, that might represent a tradition of something called the all-seeing eye. Which is sort of a reference to, I think, God and also your conscience. This is an artwork by a famous artist named Shepard Fairey. And the way this is made is he had several prints, like prints on paper, that he pasted onto the wall. When this says wheat paste down here, that's what that means. It's essentially he wallpapered the outside of a building with a mixture of wheat, or flour, plus water. Mixed together makes a really great glue. And you can put up wallpaper with it, but you can also put artwork on the walls outside of a building. How about iconography here? What do we see? You might recognize this face. Hopefully you do. This is of Elvis Presley, one of the preeminent people of rock and roll. And what else? You see a gun pointing at you. So what does that mean? That gun could represent a threat to a lot of people, especially if it's pointing at them. What is this? What do these belts mean? Well, he kind of looks like an outlaw or someone in the West, in the Wild West. So looking at little bits of the image, you can identify objects and what those objects might represent in order to give clues as to what the artwork might be about. This is a famous artwork by an artist named Andy Warhol. Hopefully you've heard of Andy Warhol. Many of you have. It's no problem if you haven't. But he was probably the most famous artist of the 1900s or of the 20th century. He died in, I think, 1988. Mediums and techniques. The materials and tools that artists use to create a work of art comprise its medium. Artistic techniques are methods, the specific ways in which mediums are handled, controlled, and applied. So, what is the medium of this sculpture? I'll give you a hint. You can look and see what the artwork is made out of. So, this artwork is made out of 600 pounds of chocolate. I would say that the medium of the artwork is chocolate. The technique is how the artist used the chocolate to make the artwork. So, the question is, what is the technique? You might see some clues here. But also, this gives you a clue. The artist Janine Antoni gnawed the chocolate. That means she was biting at it, chewing at it. And so it appears to me that the technique is that she melted down chocolate, and she had a big box, and she filled that box with chocolate. That's called casting. She cast chocolate into a cube to make a solid cube, and then she started eating it around the edges. That is the technique. Well, what's the medium of this painting, and what is the technique? The medium is oil on canvas. Oil is a type of paint. And the technique, you can describe it in any way you can imagine. I would say that the technique is soft. It is fuzzy. The colors blend together in some places, up here. The technique is dreamlike, because it looks to me like I'm in a dream. So the artist Claude Monet was famous in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he really started to popularize sort of abstraction in a way where the artwork is representational, meaning it looks like the objects that they represent, such as these flowers, but he's starting to remove them a little bit from the reality. He started to abstract them a little bit. Now Picasso, who you've heard of, made abstract artwork, but Monet was just the very beginning of that trend. Art historians would call this abstract, what would they call it? I believe they would call it abstract expressionism. I think that might be a little wrong. I'll check on that. Oh, I'm sorry. Art historians would call this impressionism. So, what are we looking at here? This is another painting by an artist named Helen Frankenthaler. What is the medium? Well, the medium is paint, acrylic paint, and what is the technique. What do you think the technique is? How do you think she made this? I do want to point out that this painting is over 8 feet tall, meaning it would not fit, it would not stand up in your living room. And it is almost 8 feet wide. So this is bigger than some of the walls in your house. So I would say that the technique of this is that she used watered down paint and made washes, which is a light see-through paint like in watercolor. She made washes on the canvas. She may have poured paint on there and then brushed it around. But also, with her technique, she defined spaces for color to live. So there are these defined regions that she filled with color, and that too is part of her technique. So when you're talking about technique, you're talking about how did the artist put the artwork together. Style. Style is the distinctive mode of expression that results from the way in which an artist handles materials and the elements and principles of art and design. An artist, a group of artists, a period, or a culture can represent a distinctive artistic style. This painting is by Vincent van Gogh, who you might have heard of. Maybe you've seen the painting Starry Night or A Cafe Terrace. Van Gogh, it has very recognizable artwork. You can really, if you have never seen a particular painting, you will know it was his because of his style. Sometimes his paint is really thick, and you can see brush strokes. You can see brush strokes here, and you can see the brush strokes here. You can see swirls. You can see an attention to detail that is almost unlike. There's too much detail in some of this. It's unlike reality. And another part of his style is there are other areas, such as this man's coat, which doesn't have as much detail in it as what it ought to have. This is style. Subject. This is a big important word. Subject is the what of a work of art. Subject incorporates all of these other words. Subject incorporates style, medium, technique, iconography, form. It's all part of the subject. Subject is the what of a work of art. We will be coming back to this. Pay attention. What is subject? Subject is what. It is what the art is about. So people, places, things, themes, processes, events, and ideas are all possible subjects within a work of art. So in this artwork, the subject is There is a woman, a young woman, maybe a teenager. The teenager is on the floor on her hands and knees, and she is looking past the viewer, past you being the viewer. There's iconography in this photograph, which is also part of the subject matter. Namely, I see a plaid skirt and a button-up shirt. To me, this looks like a school uniform. So we have a young woman who to me looks scared, on her hands and knees with a school uniform on. I can also say that the floor doesn't seem to match where you would expect a schoolgirl to be. It looks like a warehouse or a factory floor. Looks like a dirty place. A place where you might not see her. All of these elements are all part of the subject. What is the subject of this artwork? This is another large painting, 8 feet by 8 feet. The subject of this artwork is everything that we see. Let's start on the back. We see 2 palm trees. We see a modern house, like a 1950s modern house. We see some grass, something that looks like pavement, a blue line here, and a blue area here. Looks like a swimming pool. We see a rectangle-ish thing coming out of here that looks like a diving board. And right in the center we see a big smudge. Something that looks like it might be a splash, if this is in fact a swimming pool. Back to Helen Frankenthaler. What is the subject of this artwork? Well, first I would say it is non-objective. Non-objective art makes no reference to the natural world. It may be difficult to discern the subject, but certainly it has a subject. Well, how is it organized? We have a purpley section, which might be called mauve. We have a green section and a yellow section, and this off-white section, a little bit of black up here. Well, to me, the subject might have everything to do with our perception as the viewer of color. So the subject of this painting very well might be color, or it might actually be our, the subject might be ourselves, the viewer, and how we interact with that color. Content. This is our second huge word of the day. Content comes close to being the why of a work of art. The content of a work includes not only its form, but also its subject matter and its underlying meanings or themes. So think about the symbolism, think about the subject matter, think about everything about an artwork, and try to string it together, and maybe you can figure out why this art is here, what it is about, how the elements are interacting with each other, and in what way. So, what is the content of this artwork? Well, let's look at the title. The Judenplatz Holocaust Memorial, the Nameless Library. So maybe this artwork has something to do with a library. Most certainly it does. Most certainly has something to do with the Holocaust. With the subject matter of this artwork, we see what looks like doors. We see something that looks strangely like bookshelves and books on the outside. We see that it is all made out of really heavy cement. Maybe those doors don't even open. So we think about the Holocaust. We think about libraries. We look at the symbolism in here, and it seems to, an iconography, and it seems to back up what the title is. I would argue that this has something to do with World War II, and the maybe you can, imagine that Nazis would come into town and burn books. They were known for burning libraries and books, especially books related to what they considered to be not Aryan or not of themselves. I would say the content of this artwork is a sort of ghost of a library. It is a memorial to times gone by, times lost. Memorial to the Holocaust. What is the content of this artwork? Well, in the subject matter, we see 3 what look like women in this field. It looks to me like they have wheat in their hands, little scraps of wheat. They're bending down. Behind the women, we see a wagon that's filled with hay. We see horses. See a man on the horse over here. Part of the subject matter again is a field. They're outdoors, it's the sky. Well, what are the women wearing? They're wearing bonnets. They're wearing what really looks to me like the clothes of peasants. That would be considering the iconography. Pull back to what you think you know to try to pick apart an artwork. The Gleaners. What does gleaners mean? I'll look up a definition. Someone who gathers something in small pieces, slowly and carefully. So these women are gathering something in small pieces. So these peasant women are gathering something in small pieces. It looks like they're picking up scraps. I would say that the content of this work is of 3 women picking up wheat that was left over from the harvest. Perhaps they were poor and could not afford wheat to bake bread themselves. This is the end of chapter 1 and the end of this video. Go ahead and when you're good and ready, start watching week 2, chapter 2 video.